So, welcome to another episode of Just Me. And today I'm joined by Mark Fielding, aka Apocalypse Now. So, Mark, firstly, welcome. Please tell us who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you for having me on, Sid. It's a pleasure. Your reputation precedes you, so you've inspired a lot of people. So thank you for having me on. As you said, yeah, I'm Mark, aka the Apocalypse Daddy. Not Apocalypse Now, but I have written on Apocalypse Now, so there is a link. I love this question because it allows me to be whoever I want. So first and foremost, I'm a family man. I spend most of my time with my family and friends, and I love doing things. I have hundreds of hobbies. I could live 10 lifetimes doing the things I love. I live in the French Alps, so I do a lot of snowboarding, climbing, cycling, running, swimming. But I also like reading and writing and thinking and meditating and listening to podcasts and technology and learning. And then I weave all of that into my writing as the Apocalypse Daddy, the alternative fatherhood blog. And the Apocalypse Daddy is a guide, a letter, insight for my children. So I'm writing it. I started writing it for my children so that when they're older, they'll have my thoughts on learning and music and film and technology and all my ideas and thoughts that one day in the future they will get to read and see how the family lived in 2021.
Oh, how nice.
And that's what it started from. It started, of course, like many things, out of the COVID lockdowns. I wanted to document the time for my family back in England, but it's mutated and expanded, and now, yeah, it's a letter to my children, but it's also a place where I can learn as well, and other people.
So, how did you arrive at today? And I know that earlier we were talking about your route to where you are today, but just so I mean, please tell us about the love story as well. So can you kind of go back to Mark, born where?
But born in Burton upon Trent, which, if those who know England, Burton upon Trent is the home of Marmite and Bass beer. So I was born in the town of Marmite and beer. Nothing, my childhood was pretty standard. One of three brothers. I grew up on a farm in the countryside. So I consider myself very lucky in that regard, because one of three brothers, and we would just spend hours and hours and days roaming the countryside miles from home.
Oh, lovely.
Um, and then, yeah, no, a pretty normal, regular upbringing. And then I remember it was about early 90s. I was born in 1979, so I'm a 90s child. My formative years were in the 90s. I remember 1991, 92, the start of a school summer holiday. And back then, those school summer holidays seemed to stretch on forever. And my dad at the time, my dad, he was, you wouldn't believe it now if you've seen him on WhatsApp, but at the time he was quite an early uptaker in technology, and we had satellite television. And I sat down with my little brother back in the early 90s, turned on the TV, and MTV came on. And I remember it because for the next 8 years, I was just went on a journey of MTV and rolling news and all this culture, this overseas culture kind of ransacked my mind. And
Brilliant.
I rebelled against the countryside and started skateboarding, joined a rock band, kind of moved to the city. And that's where I think the Apocalypse Dad was born, but that's where I was really born. And then went to university, studied international relations at university, kind of floated around after university, trying to find my path, what I wanted to do, because I studied international relations at university, but it didn't seem like that was something I wanted to spend my life doing. So instead of that, I went to work in editorial. I worked in a book publisher. And you spoke about a love story. That's where my love story started. I was working in this book publisher. There was a French woman who was also studying publishing. We hit it off back then. After the job finished, she moved back to France. I went to my other passion, which was snowboarding. I went to do some ski seasons in Austria. Long story short, the winter ended. I stopped in Paris on my way back to England to see Benny, this French lady. And that was in 2008. And I never got home, and I'm still in France with two French kids and a French wife living in the French mountains.
I love
That's
that.
where the love story
Well,
is.
but it's such a lovely story, and the thing that I love is that you got two brothers, and you're born on a farm, and home and Marmite and beer and stuff, and then MTV comes along thanks to your dad, and then
Yeah.
suddenly that sparks an interest in you, and you're like, well, hang on a minute, as you say, it's when you were where you were or when you were born, and then now you're in France, and I just think that's such a lovely story. It really is. So, what have you learned along the way? What are your kind of key lessons?
I think having three brothers, being the middle child, it kind of helped me become resilient, and it helped me to realize I can only control my actions, not other people's reactions. And so that failure for me always was and is just so important. Yeah, dealing with failure in a way which you would use that failure to drive you forward rather than using that failure to prevent you going forward.
That's really brilliant. And how was it being the kind of the middle of the sandwich? Because there's lots of theories, isn't there, about oldest child, youngest child, middle child, all that kind of stuff, syndrome scenarios or whatever. Did you feel that kind of, oh, I'm the middle child, or was it just, you just got on with it?
Oh, I've always just got on with it. Perhaps it was more the competitive nature of three boys, which I'm faster than my younger brother. I'm not as fast as my older brother, so you're having to balance being the victor in sport and not. There wasn't anything about being the middle child, so I experienced anything different
Hmm.
because of that. But I think possibly the environment of competition that being one of three brothers provided.
That's really cool. So, what and who has helped you along the way then?
Many people, many things. I'm a product of my environment, so people, experiences. I'm a big reader, a lot of books, a lot of podcasts have helped me along the way. Huge amounts of books, both fiction and non-fiction, which have helped me. I'll tell you one thing, actually, that the Farnham Street blog. I don't know if you're familiar with a podcast, sorry, called the Farnham Street Podcast.
No.
It's a fantastic podcast. It's about mental models. It's about how we think and the biases which are involved in that.
Brilliant.
And it's an awesome podcast to help you think about how you're reacting to situations. So that's definitely helped me. My
Wow.
children have helped me to
Mhm.
inspired me to go further, be curious. My children have inspired me to be healthier as well,
Wow.
to take my body more seriously. Like flexibility is youth, so they've inspired me to do much more looking after my body. They've inspired me that way. My friends, how they deal with hardship and tragedy. I think your friends can be a great source of inspiration and help. So yeah, the things and the people, my family, my friends, and the your input equals your output. So a lot of what I read, what I watch, who I speak to, they've all helped me.
That's really lovely. I like that. I'll look up the Farnham Street podcast. Thank you for that. It's brilliant. So, what obstacles have kind of hindered you and in some ways helped you as well?
As most of your listeners, broken bones and broken hearts, they've been the obstacles, failure and success. I've thought about this question. There's a lot of things that have hindered everybody, but if I choose one which I've overcome, coronavirus aside, one of the cultural and linguistical barriers of moving and living and deciding to stay in France. Because when I first arrived, I didn't speak any French. The food was different, the way of thinking was different, behavior
Mm,
was different, the way business worked was different. And not speaking the language and trying to assimilate all of that was pretty daunting and very frustrating at times.
I bet.
And in terms of career choices when I was like early 20s. Yeah, it definitely hampered that. But eventually, obviously, what did Ryan Holiday say? The obstacle is the way. So how you respond to those obstacles, what defines you. And eventually, yeah, it became amazing. I live two cultures, two languages, two ways of looking at things. And it took a long time to reach that realization. And I probably still haven't completely reached it. But yeah,
Yes. I mean, you mentioned kind of it being frustrating, and I can imagine because it's you're immersed in it, isn't it? I mean, you're there, and then kind of learning the language, and then all the nuances that go with that as well. And were you
yeah.
accepted? I mean, were people kind of like, oh, great, here's Mark, and welcome?
A little caveat with that, because I didn't speak French. Some of the first work I did in Paris was teaching English. I did some business teaching, and there's quite a big expat community, so I had English friends as well. But having a French girlfriend at the time who became my wife, I was also part of the French scene. And look, Sid, I'll always be English to my wife's. I'll always be English to my wife's family. French people, my French isn't. I still have an accent. I'll always be English. I'll always be a little bit of an outsider wherever. That's just human nature. Perhaps that will change with my kids growing up bilingual. I don't know, but there's always, yeah, you're always a little bit of an outsider. But it's not a massive difference. It's only France and England, French and English, so there's huge similarities.
And do they refer to you as the roast beef or any of those kind of
Yes, they
sayings?
yeah they do, and there's they one of the so living in France taught me a lot about France, but it's also taught me a lot about the UK. So obviously, being away, getting taking a step back from where you're from gives you the opportunity to see your roots and your culture perhaps more clearly than if you're deep in it.
Mm.
And they do call me roast beef, and all those jokes are. But I will
So,
say that I grew up watching Hello Hello, so we know how we the we view the French. But the French don't spend as much time on the English. For so their French might be the Spanish or the Greek. So there's a lot of, it's quite interesting to see how we spend quite a lot of time laughing at French idiosyncrasies, and they spend a lot of
mm,
time laughing at other people's. I tell you
that-
one thing though, my wife won't watch British panel shows, comedy panel shows with me very often, because she's noticed that in every single time we watch Mock the Week or Have I Got News for You or one of these shows, there's always some jokes about the French on it.
oh, really?
Yeah, which is quite interesting.
Mm.
I still watch it because I think it's funny.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's also that little link to home, isn't it? I remember when I lived abroad, it's just nice, isn't it, to kind of go onto the BBC website or to watch, as you say, Have I Got News for You or Mock the Week or whatever. I just find that's a little kind of like, I don't know, you sort of feel a little closer back to home.
Where did you live? Sorry, I know. I just
Oh, I lived in
interested.
Amsterdam for a while, and I lived over in New York as well,
Okay,
and
nice.
lived in Cyprus as a child, and used to listen to the BBC World Service a lot. And they used to have things on like the Goons and things on, which were just it was just great, really. So we used to sit and huddled in front of a radio and just kind of listen away, which was kind of good. So, how do you keep going when things get tough? I mean, I know you mentioned kind of broken hearts and broken bones and kind of learning from mistakes, but what else? What other things do you do to dig in?
I've had a lot of practice. I'm ginger as well, so it gets you build up a tough skin. This is going to sound a bit funny, but I don't think anything's taught me as much about getting up and resilience than probably skateboarding. I did a lot of skateboarding when I was young, and when you're skateboarding, you have no choice but to just get back up, and that really helped me. I think that physicality, like having to get back up physically, helps you to get back up mentally. I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in, and my kids, Alice and Luca, get to experience this when we do early morning runs. When I'll run them into the ground when they're two. I really believe that there's a powerful link between how you respond physically and how you respond negatively. Obviously, not everybody can skateboard when they're old. So I've read quite a lot about resilience. I've written about it on the Apocalypse Daddy, because when I was researching and reading about resilience, it kept dawning on me that all of these points, so being cognitively flexible, physical fitness, friends and family, self talk, Alice and Luca were doing that. The kids do that all the time. So all this big structure of building resilience, which kids have, being new input, phoning friends, phoning family, especially the last year, everyone's just been.
Mm.
You must have seen and spoken to a lot of people who've been affected by the last year and a half now, and
Mm.
yeah, having a system of in place to help of support, sleep, physical fitness, yeah, all of those good things that keep you on track.
Yeah, I mean, it's something actually. I mean, I didn't really do skateboarding when I was younger, but I watch people now in skate parks and stuff. And the thing is, there's no shortcut to learning it, is there? I mean, you have to fall
No,
off. I mean, there is, as you say, the physicality is sometimes, I always find, with sport that pain is such a great teacher because
yeah,
you either kind of submit to it or you push through it and you endure it.
yeah. I think your mental fitness and your mental resilience is can be linked. The more, yeah, I don't think there is. How do you say? I don't think they're binary, but I
Yeah,
think there can be a big link between it.
yeah.
Also, cold showers, meditation.
Cold showers and yeah, absolutely. The old kind of Wim Hof kind of method of
Yeah, Wim Hof.
kind of, yeah. So, what advice would you give your younger self if you could go back?
Practical advice would be it's never too early to start saving. I was I was a terrible money manager in my early years, in my well, for the first 30 years of my life, really terrible at money management. And yeah, I would tell my younger self it's never too early to start saving, because you never know when the world's going to stop and you'll need some savings.
That's so
So
true.
my practical advice would be that, just because I was so terrible at it, and if I could go back in time, I'd tell myself that. And the second, again, the naivety of youth, I'd tell myself to listen more, stop talking and listen. But I wouldn't have listened to me, of course, back then. But that's what I'd tell myself.
It's difficult, isn't it, when you're younger because you're charging through life, aren't you, and exploring and being curious and being creative and kind of doing stuff that you don't really want to listen in some ways, but it's such an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. And I love this question as well, because it's whatever my advice would be to my younger self, I wouldn't have heeded it, because you've got to learn by experience, don't you? I think there are people who can, at a young age, take on and assimilate what people say, but I think those people are a rare breed, and I definitely wasn't one of them.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And what advice would you give to others?
So the Apocalypse Daddy was actually born out of a Stoic quote, and although this might sound a bit pretentious, but when the lockdown came, I think someone for Christmas had given me meditations or something like this book, and there's just this quote, and they just seem to be very focused on control, and it just was the perfect kind of philosophy at the perfect time when everything was so out of my control that the borders were closed. We couldn't leave our house. We couldn't go further than a kilometer from our house. We couldn't go into restaurants. We couldn't see our friends. One of the jobs I was working at the time for this startup, they closed. Everything was out of my control and everybody's control. And just had this quote that you can only control how you react. You can't control what happens or other people's opinions or other people's actions. And yeah, I think that was the advice I would give one. You can only control how you react to something. So
That's really lovely. I like that, and it is, it's a bit obvious, but it is so true, isn't it? It's that thing. It's not what happens to me, as you say. It's how I react and how I then go forward.
okay.
So, what legacy? I mean, you mentioned about. I mean, I love the fact that you're writing your kind of your blog, and all the posts and things as an account for your children, which I think is wonderful. But what legacy would you really like to leave behind for people?
I'm 42. Am I 42 or 41? I never quite remember. I'm 4, 9, 7, 9, 40, let's say 41. Too young to be hopefully thinking about legacies. If I can inspire Alice and Luca to to be the best they can. It's like everybody else, and I think most people who've been on your podcast say the same thing. It's family. It's all about at the end of it. At the end of it, you can't take any of it with you, can you? Just the memories, and it's family and friends. So if I can leave that behind as a legacy, the knowledge that to my kids that stuff doesn't really matter as much as the people you're with and the memories you build.
The thing though that I find just so foxing, Mark, is the fact that if you go back, how many hundreds of years or decades or even thousands of years, when you go to, I don't know, people like Marcus Aurelius and Plato and everybody else, they were writing about this stuff then. Why is it that
Yeah.
we haven't why does it not sink in? Is it because we don't listen and we just kind of go, well, we'll just create a different world and it'll all be fine?
I don't know the answer to that question, Sid.
Mm.
I wish I did. Yeah, what is that? What you think? I think that's probably as good a
Yeah,
explanation as any. I think that being aware of it, yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know why more people don't come to that realization. It's so simple and it's been spoken about for so long, hasn't it?
absolutely. Yeah, and it's not like it's like Brené Brown says, isn't she? This isn't our first rodeo, guys. And you kind of go, yeah, you're right. And those elements of kind of being kind. I mean, all the wonderful things that you spoke about, kindness and friends and family and stuff. And I mean, maybe there is a more of a consciousness that's happened since COVID with people like your good selves and maybe myself, talking about this stuff and getting that message out there of actually, at the end of the day, the legacy is about kindness and about truth and honesty and trust and friendship and connection. Maybe that's
Yeah,
maybe that's the magic source that we need to realize that is still here.
yeah, that's the magic source.
I have a question here. So, if you were to use one word to describe yourself, Mark, what would that be?
By what's going around my head now, I would say undecided. What one word that undecided? Curious. Let's go curious. I like curious.
Yeah, I'd put that one down for you definitely. Especially when you kind of go back to your childhood days and that kind of curiosity that was sparked by MTV, which I absolutely love. Because it
Yeah.
was such a great. I mean, I know it's still it's available now, but it certainly doesn't have as much power as it did. But at the time, it was hugely powerful, wasn't it? Across Europe.
I think that was, and the same with the rolling news because it was not alone, but there wasn't many choices, was it? Everything media has become so fragmented. There's so many sources that there's not one single, or there's not even 100 single music channel or news channels or whatever the subject is. There's so many choices that I don't think anything will ever have that kind of power again.
No, I sort of I feel like that, and in a way that it's brilliant that we have more choice, but in a way it's sort of a shame because when I like when I was growing up, MTV was just like, oh, have you seen MTV? And it was now it's like, oh my life, there's just so much. As you say, there's so much choice, which is good, but it sort of limits it in a way.
You're an expert on this then. So how do you go about making the choice when you have so I'm always I find it difficult to choose and decide when I'm faced with a lot of options. Like how should I be thinking about it to make it easier for me to make a decision when I'm faced with 100 choices?
Oh, crumbs. Good question. Actually, I've just written a newsletter actually for June, and one of the things that the subject actually is connection and how we find those connections. And I'm a big Radio 4 listener and fan, only because there's so much kind of good content there. And every time
Yeah.
somebody mentions something, so for instance, you good self, you mentioned kind of Farnham Street podcast. I'm like, right, I'll write that down, and I go and listen to that. And in a way, my kind of direction is dictated by what I hear. So, for instance, I like Thought Cages on Radio 4, and I know they go back, quite a few years. But again, there's things they mention. I go, right, let me listen to that. And that's that thing where you mention out of curiosity. That kind of, I suppose, sets my sail anyway. Sometimes.
What was the name of the show? Sorry, the Thought Box,
Yeah, Thought Cages.
Thought
Yeah,
Cages.
it's on Radio 4, and it's really good. I mean, it really is. it just kind of just they just explore different ways of thinking, branding, music, and it's like the Farnham Street stuff you say with kind of mental models. It just makes you think and kind of go, oh yeah. So the stuff that we take as being kind of gospel in a way, it then challenges that, and then it makes you kind of, I don't know, explore it a bit further. And I think that's the thing that I love is just being able to just think about things differently.
Definitely, totally agree with you. What's that famous quote? Is it that I can't remember who said it, but the best thing that a scientist can say is not eureka, but that's interesting, because it means you're changing some one of your preconditioned ideas is just been changed, and I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's interesting you mentioned science because with scientists, when they do experiments, they get to an end of experiment and they don't see it as failure if it's failed. They just see that as another kind of point of learning, isn't it? Whilst is for a lot of people, when something doesn't work out, that's a failure, and that's where science is really good. It's always pushing the kind of the envelope to learn more and to kind of know more.
Yeah, but isn't one of the driving forces of science is failure? People looking to disprove and disprove theories.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It really has, and
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I love the Chichester story. I just so much that you say is just so lovely, um, and I love your reason, and I love the ethos behind Apocalypse Study. I think it's just really really cool. It really is. It's been lovely talking to you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Very welcome.